It's been a long time getting from there to here. Sorry, but I just had to get that out of my system. Hello, welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Enterprise Season 1. So this video is the first in the series of videos where I review every single episode of Star Trek Enterprise, one season at a time. In this video I will cover every episode of Star Trek Enterprise Season 1. So of course I have to start with a spoiler warning for pretty much all of Enterprise, whatever, you know the drill. And so I'm going to go episode by episode, give my thoughts on Star Trek Enterprise Season 1, and I should give a disclaimer, a forewarning that I do not think very highly of Enterprise Season 1, or Season 2 for that matter. So, if you're a big fan, you may disagree, and if that kind of thing troubles you, then maybe this video isn't for you, because I'm basically going to be trashing this season and talking about why I don't like it, and I think it's one of the worst seasons of Star Trek. And I recently heard the opinion, and this is a pretty common opinion, I heard it a lot, that nothing's worse than Discovery, that the two seasons of Discovery is much worse than anything Star Trek ever put out, and I very, 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 very strongly disagree. I think easily the worst two seasons of the Star Trek franchise are Enterprise Seasons 1 and 2. I think they're the worst, even worse than Discovery, worse than the first two seasons of Next Gen. In fact, I kind of like Discovery Season 2, to be honest, but that's another discussion. So, this is my opinion. If you're not familiar with my channel, this is where I'm coming from when watching Enterprise Season 1. Now, so of course I rewatched the episodes to do this review, and I do have to admit that the season wasn't quite as bad as I remember. That there were some episodes that were either mediocre or actually pretty good. So there were more good episodes in the season than I thought there would be. So maybe, it wasn't quite as bad as I remember, but it's still bad. When I averaged out, I gave a score between 1 to 10 of all the episodes of the season. When I averaged that out, it came to a 4.75, which is still low, because I consider anything below 5 or below is in my bad range. Episodes I don't like. Episodes I do like, I give 6 through 10. So that means on average, I did not like it. Now, actually, and it's funny because I actually thought I'd give most of the episodes 1s and 2s, but it actually didn't work out that way. So if I go, I'm just going to ramble off the ratings of all 25 episodes that I give. So I got 4, 5, 2, 3, 3, 5, 2, 7, 5, 6, 6, 8, 4, 3, 2, 4, 1, 1, 1, 7, 4, 9, 2, 5, 9. So there's a couple of 9s. You hear an 8 in there, and a few 7s and 6, but then a lot of 1s and 2s and 3s. And this is where the season really gets me. Now, since I mentioned that theme song, I'm sorry, but whenever I talk about Enterprise, I gotta talk about the theme song, because I did a whole review on Enterprise as a whole, and where I was yelling about the theme song, and I said that it was the single worst, most insulting thing that the Star Trek franchise has ever done, and I 100% stand by that. In fact, when I did the thing, the opening where I was singing the song, I do it because it's a joke, because the theme song is a fucking joke, and it makes me, I don't want to be insulting to anyone. Everyone has their own personal taste. I understand that, but when I did my review of Enterprise, I've seen a lot of people were defending that theme song, and one person, I'll try not to be offensive here, one person posted that, oh, you talk about the theme song sucking, but you have your shitty theme song on your YouTube video. How, you're being a hypocrite. That was probably the singular most ridiculous and idiotic comment I have ever gotten in my life, in my YouTube career, shall we say. Because, alright, here, first off, you know, it's all, musical taste is all a matter of opinion. People have different tastes. What I think is crap, some people love, and what I love, some people think is crap. It's just the way things go, and that's fine. You know, maybe someone likes the musical sound of the opening theme of Enterprise, and that same person does not like the theme music I had for my YouTube videos. Now, if you're not familiar, it's not the theme music I had for this video. If you're not familiar with my channel, I used to have a different theme song for my channel for each video, and it was like a guitar, start with like a bass line, and boom, boom, ba 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 ba. I actually quite liked it, but I did have quite a few people complaining about it, and I was just sick of hearing the complaints, so I changed it, and no one's complained about the new song, so I'm sticking with that. And I think maybe the new song works a little bit better, but I still stand behind the other song. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But here's the thing. Put that aside. Put the personal taste of maybe that person, you know, people would love that Enterprise theme song and hate the theme song I have, even though my personal taste would be the theme song I have is only like a billion times better, and it's been alone, but we're not going to get into that. But put personal taste aside. That is an idiotic comment to say, oh, I have no room to talk because I had a shitty theme song, so I can't talk about Enterprise's shitty theme song. When I'm a tiny YouTube channel, a guy who records videos in his bedroom on his spare time, as maybe gets around 100, between 100 and 1,000 if I'm lucky, views on each video. You compare that to a TV show that is in a long-running, long-lasting franchise with a huge fan base and lots of money and backing behind it. This is a show and a franchise, so you can't compare a themed song to a TV show and the Star Trek franchise to that of a YouTuber who barely just does this shit in the free time. That is a stupid comparison to make. And secondly, my theme song, if, you know, as I said, I can change it or whatever, it's just for a YouTube channel. But we're talking about a Star Trek show here. And for them to have a theme song that, again, regardless of your taste on that particular style of music, does not at all fit in the pantheon of the Star Trek franchise in the least. In fact, the reason why I hate this song so much, and I hate that it's the theme to Enterprise, doesn't actually has as much to do with my personal taste in music. Because honestly, if I just heard the song on the radio, I wouldn't be like, oh, this sucks, turn it off. I would just be like, I'd tolerate it if it was someone else's radio or whatever. If it was my radio, I'd just change the station. But if it was someone else was listening to, I was in the car or whatever, and the song came on the radio, I wouldn't like pitch a fit. I wouldn't be like, change it, this sucks. I would just be like, oh, whatever, and I'd listen to it and get to the next song and just be another thing. That's not the issue. The issue is that kind of popular pop music has no place being a theme song in a Star Trek show, and for them to do so screams of trying to look cool or poppy or appeal to the masses. It is trying too hard. It's obvious. It's like, look at me, come watch the show. And that's why I think this is the most offensive thing to Star Trek. That's what pisses me off or irks me the most about the theme song, is how pathetic it is that they're trying so hard to to appeal poppy or appeal cool to the masses. And here's the thing with Enterprise, is that all of their attempts to appeal cool don't actually appeal cool. They seem like your parents trying to be cool. It's like someone who doesn't understand what being cool is like trying to be cool. It's so obvious as a bunch of business execs sitting in their business suits going like, oh, this is going to be cool. It reminds me of that Simpsons thing where they're coming up with the idea of Poochie and, the itching and scratching. They said, let's add Poochie. Oh, he needs to be cool. He needs to have a backward hat and say, hey. Like, that's the kind of image that comes to my mind when I think of the execs coming up with this theme song for Enterprise, and a lot of the stuff they do. Now, here's the thing, though. Some people argue that the theme song for Enterprise actually fits with, the show, and for seasons 1 and 2, I actually agree. I think this shitty theme song does encapsulate how shitty the actual show is. It does fit with the show. It does perfectly describe or intonate what the show is like, because the show itself is all just a misguided attempt to appeal cool. Like, the whole thing within the first 2 seasons of them taking Star Trek out of the title and just calling it Enterprise. It's like, why they... Here's the thing about this show, and particularly with season 1 and season 2, which I think season 2 is going to be worse, but I haven't rewatched that yet, but by memory, yeah. But anyway, here's the thing, is that their tone is all over the fucking place. This show doesn't know who its audience is. It wants to make a Star Trek show and have all these Star Trek references, has Klingons, and show the origins of Starfleet, yet they take the word Star Trek out of the title to try to appeal to mass audience. They don't have a typical Star Trek orchestral theme song. They have a pop Bryan Adams fucking sound-alike theme song, and they have like swear words. Oh god, every time Archer swears it makes me laugh. He comes off as such a dork. Oh, I'm gonna knock you on your ass. It's like, it just doesn't fit. And so it's like, are they trying to appeal to Star Trek fans or not? They can't decide it. And here's the other thing, is a lot of the episodes remind me of the original series in its simplicity. I don't mean it reminds me of the original series and how good it is. I mean it reminds me of the simplistic 60s aspect of it. Like, it took the negative aspects of the original series and incorporated it and left out all the stuff that made the original series good. And so at some level it does seem like they're trying to appeal to children, to younger audiences, by making it a bit more childlike, like the whole Oasis episode, which I already reviewed, where like, ooh, there's a ghost, ooh, like, and other episodes where the humor and the interactions remind me of a kid's show. Like, so it's like they're trying to appeal to children, and yet they also try way too hard with sex appeal. They have those scenes in the decontamination chamber, which are, again, obvious lame attempts to ramp up the sex appeal. Watching those things, I just picture the execs in the office saying, we need more sex appeal in this scene, and the show needs to have more sex. In fact, this was the problem with Voyager as well. But Voyager wasn't quite as apparent as it is here. Here, it's like in your face, and it's beyond obvious that they're trying to cram sex appeal, have it add all this references to Paul and how sexy it is, and it has like Reed's dreaming about her kissing him, and then him talking about her bum and shit like that. So it's confused. They don't know who the fuck their audience are. Are they trying to appeal to children, younger audience, or are they trying to appeal to older audiences with the sex appeal? And are they trying to appeal to Star Trek fans, or are they not trying to appeal to Star Trek fans? Are they trying to appeal to fans of hard science by having shows about comets, or are they trying to appeal to the more speculative fiction, science fiction side by having this temporal Cold War and these shape-shifting aliens? It's like they can't make up their fucking mind what the tone of the show is and who their target audience are, and so it comes out very disjointed and all over the place. Now, here's the thing. Even though I said like some of the episodes were better than I thought they were, and I read out the list of the numbers, and there were some higher numbers up there, I still don't think very highly of this season, even though do have some good episodes or some mediocre episodes, because overall, when I look at the overall tone of the season, there's just so many mistakes. Like, the characters are really flat to begin with, and like, I hate what they did with the Vulcans. That was again a contrived attempt to ramp up the tension. Because we have the Vulcans are the main aliens who interact with humans, so we need their relationship to be antagonistic because we need to ramp up the tension. But it doesn't actually make sense. And a lot of these episodes, the Vulcans are just dickheads, which I don't think, it's not really in their character how they've been portrayed. Now, granted, season 4 will come up with a reason why they aren't dickheads anymore for the original series time period, but that's just showing season 4 being how awesome it is, how they were able to correct the mistakes of previous seasons. It doesn't at all excuse these first 2 seasons, and it does make these first 2 seasons a hell of a lot harder to watch, because it's just so irritating how out of character all the Vulcans are behaving, and how they're being really, they're not emotionless, they're being purposely arrogant and antagonistic. And I talked about a little bit about this in my Deep Space Nine Season 7 review, because they actually started doing that there, and it carried on to Enterprise, where that's never, I mean, sometimes Spock or Tuvok does come off as arrogant. Especially Tuvok. I mean, that's true. Sometimes they do come off as arrogant, but they were never this arrogant to the point of being antagonistic, the point of being obtuse, and a lot of, like, some of their reasoning is not at all logical. They go out of their way to oppress the humans, or say that, or insult them, and just the whole, especially the way T'Pol was reacting to, oh, you smell, God, you humans fucking stink, you smelly humans, get out of here. Like, I don't know. I realized they were trying to show the intricacies of different aliens and how they would react, but it just doesn't work. And the other thing is that the premise of setting it like as a prequel, as the first like Federation ship that's going out there, like, it was not my first choice of premise. This is probably, when I first heard the premise, I was so eager to see what show would come up after Voyager, and when I first heard this premise, I was like, oh, really? That's what they're going with? There's like an infinite universe, like so much they could explore, and so they decide to do that. But here's the thing, I didn't discount the show then. I was still like, okay, but you could still do something good with that. But they didn't. Like, what I was hoping and wishing the show to be is what they ended up doing in season 4. That's what the show should have been to begin with. This crap that we got in the first 2 seasons is something nobody wanted, and something no Star Trek show should frickin' do. And I don't excuse the show needs to find its footing. Like, I'll excuse even Next Generation, because there's a lot of behind the scenes conflicts and issues with Next Generation, and their first 2 seasons were shit, but they managed to turn it. But I think Next Generation, as I said, I don't think their first 2 seasons were as bad as Enterprise first 2 seasons, first of all. And because I think the core elements of the characters were there. They had interesting characters like Geordi and Data and Worf and Riker and Yar. They had the core elements of good characters. And there was, even though a lot of what they did with the episodes was too cheesy and corny and often silly, the elements were there from the beginning. They just needed time to refine it. That is not the case with Enterprise. Enterprise, the first 2 seasons, the elements aren't there. the characters are not interesting. They're completely flat. And it's a testament to the writers of season 3 and 4 that they managed to take these flat, uninteresting characters and make them interesting. It's not like Next Generation where the characters, core of them were interesting to begin with. They just weren't being treated right in the first 2 seasons. Here it's the characters are flat. They just managed to elevate these flat characters in later seasons, which is a testament to the writing in seasons 3 and 4. The core, except for Dr. Phlox. I always loved Dr. Phlox. He's, one of my favorite characters of the Star Trek franchise. But other than him, here's the thing. The concept of Enterprise, particularly the first 2 seasons, I blame on Brannon Braga. Some people will blame Rick Berman, and yes, he does share a lot of the blame. Rick Berman is responsible. He's basically the stereotype of the business suit exec that I've heard tons of stories about him, like just being a dickhead to the actors in the Star Trek shows and just mandating. Like every time I hear him mandating something, I'm like, why the fuck is he doing that? He's making the show worse. So don't get me wrong. I'm sure I see Rick Berman's hands on this as well. But Brannon Braga, here's the thing. A lot of people defend him, and be clear, he has written some of my favorite episodes of the Star Trek franchise. He's written Frame of Mind, and with Ronald D. Moore, they've written they wrote the fucking All Good Things. But here's the thing about Brannon Braga, is that he's a good writer, particularly if he's co-writing with another good writer like Ronald D. Moore. Like, they can come up with really good shit. But by himself, or even worse with Rick Berman, he's not a very good showrunner. Like, as my opinion, that him and Rick Berman, they took over Voyager in the last 3 years. It's my opinion they drove that show into the ground, and then for the final year of Voyager, they kind of just abandoned it because they wanted to do this shit. And the reason why I say I see Brannon Braga's dirty little fingers all over this is because he was the fan of doing... Now, I think he was involved with the show Cosmos, which was a hard, science show. I think with Neil deGrasse Tyson was in the remake or whatever. And so that seems to be his wheelhouse. And he's responsible for certain episodes on Voyager that, like the, what's it called? I can't remember the name of it. 1159. When it was taking place at the turn of 1999, the turn of millennium, for no reason whatsoever, just because he wanted to do it. And in other episodes, like One Small Step, where Chakotay was just idolizing this the first astronaut who went to Mars for no good reason. They had some bullshit anomaly, blah, blah, blah. So, Brannon Braga seems to have this fascination with, actual astronauts in modern times, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you can have some really good, I'm sure the Cosmos show is actually pretty good, and you can have some really good shows with modern astronauts, or astronauts in an age that's more true to science, like The Expanse, for example, is a lot more true to what it is actually like to be in space. So you can do great stuff with that, but that's never been what Star Trek is. Star Trek has never been realistic when it's come to its portrayal of space and actually being in science or whatever. It's more of a speculative, it's more of an analogy to make allegories on modern times and have present this fascinating, fantastical world with a bunch of aliens in different political situations. These aliens look just like humans, except they have bumps in their forehead. Like, nothing is realistic about that. But it's the it's the investigation into the human soul, the commentary on modern science, and the character stories. That's what Star Trek has always been about. And this is something I don't think Brannon Braga has gotten. He doesn't get this, because he constantly wants to make it about astronauts. As I said, he had several Voyager episodes, and then the concept of Enterprise. It's obvious that that's what he's wanting this to do. He wants this, and that he even said this in interviews. The whole point is to have characters who feel like you and me. But and sometimes I think it does kind of succeed of bringing a sense of realism of what it's actually like to go to an alien world for the first time. Sometimes I think that actually does work, but for the most part, it doesn't, especially when they try to do the hard science. Because that's not what Star Trek is about. That's never what Star Trek is about. That's not what you want. That is not what the Star Trek fan wants from a Star Trek show. And to try to cram that into a Star Trek show, it just doesn't fit. It's a round peg in a square hole. And it's like, and the whole thing with, nothing against modern day astronauts, but he was trying to base it off of like real life people. It's hard to say, like real life people are boring. That's why you have to fictionalize things enough and create conflict and make it interesting. And so the actual characters that they created, even though he was trying to make them like real life astronauts or real life explorers, they all come off as flat, two-dimensional. Now, that's not to say they could always be that way, because as I said, season 3 and 4 will actually do good things with these flat characters, which I'm so impressed with, which I'll get to in season 3 and 4, which I absolutely love, by the way, if you're not aware. I thought seasons 3 and 4 were amazing. But again, it's because they took the shitty premise and the shitty cast of characters and elevated them, as opposed to Next Generation, which the cast and the theme was always there. They just did the justice. But anyway, I think I got enough of the oh, no, one more thing I have to get off my chest. Something that's really bothering me throughout season 1 as I was watching it, and this is something that is also a problem with these first 2 seasons, is that the characters come off as idiots. Not only are they not very interesting, they're also moronic. And that, see, I know what they're trying to do here. They're trying to do, this is the first time humans are in space, so they're very sort of ignorant to what's out there. They're not like your Kirks or your Picards or people who've been living in space their whole lives and who was brought up in the era where humans have been traveling around in space for centuries. This is a new thing. So they're trying to portray that, but they hit on this point too hard, and the result is that it makes them come off as morons. That even if modern times, the year, 2019 is what the year is now. So even in 2019, if you took a group of trained astronauts or humans or scientists who were studying space, and they traveled, was it 200 years in the future, and you put them on this starship, and they were traveling on the starship into space, they would be infinitely smarter than these fucking morons. I'm sorry, even not having any knowledge of the future, any knowledge of the spacecraft or whatever, just from 2019 know-how, intelligence, they would just, maybe they wouldn't be as knowledgeable as Trip on how to operate a warp core, or as knowledgeable as Mayweather in order to, and not as knowledgeable as Hoshi to know all these languages, but they would have more common sense. Maybe if all they had to do is train on those instruments, train on the warp core. I mean, if they're freaking, high IQ, top of the line scientists, they would be able to learn this shit. So as long as they had time to train on all this specific equipment, they would be like infinitely smarter than these morons who seem to lack any thing of common sense. Now, because again, the show is doing it this way because they're trying to portray, they're new to the universe, but it harped on this point too hard, and this is what annoyed me, and this is particularly why I don't like Trip, Commander Tucker. I would still consider him one of the worst characters. Yes, worse than Troy. I'm saying it. One of the worst characters, and because he personifies the idiot, the moron stereotype, and I don't buy that he is a warp engineer, because how can someone who has to be so smart to operate an warp engine and be so stupid when it comes to just the common sense bullshit, and it just annoys the hell out of me. And I don't know, like some people might think I'm being prejudiced towards like Southerners, but I'm not. I'm actually thinking that Trip himself is kind of prejudiced. To have a dumb Southerner stereotype is an insult to Southerners, in my opinion. And it doesn't help, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, that the Enterprise came out in the early 2000s when George W. Bush was president. And during this time period, I was going to protest, and I was very, very, very anti-Bush. And so to have a character like Tucker, who, even watching it now, he does come off, his like intonations, it's not just he's a Southerner, he sounds and looks like Bush in particular. Like, that particular style of Texan is what he looks like. In fact, the actor, I can't remember his name, he actually played George W. Bush in a film, one of these Tom Cruise film, I can't remember, Made in America, I think it was called. He played a younger version of George W. Bush in that film. I think it was taking place during the 80s or something. And a lot of people, critics and people who analyzed it, said he did an amazing job, that he completely captured the intonations and the way George W. Bush spoke. And I can definitely see that. I don't think that would be too hard for him, to be honest. But anyway, I will say part of the reason why watching this on this rewatch, I didn't hate it quite as much, because I remember watching it for the first time when it first came out. Like, it was a lot more disappointing, because I was a huge Star Trek fan. I wanted there to be another Star Trek show after Voyager, and I was hoping it would carry on with the same timeline, or perhaps go into the future. And going into past wasn't my first idea, but, you know, I've always wanted there to be a prequel series. Like, I used to, like, fantasize when I was a teenager about there being a show taking place during the Romulan War, or maybe sometime before the original series, or between the original series and Next Generation. I thought it would be really cool. So there's ways that this could have been good, but when I first watched it, it was basically everything I feared it would be, and more. It was like even worse than I feared it would be, just seeing how boring and poorly constructed the characters were. So it's probably why I put more that's probably why I hated the episodes more when I first saw them, because at the time that's what the Star Trek franchise was, that this is what was currently running, and this is what has grown, it stumbled down to, so it made me fear for the whole Star Trek franchise. And of course those fears were correct, because the whole franchise went into a hiatus for like 10 years because of this shit show. But it wasn't because of franchise fatigue. I hear some people say that, but that's nonsense. If this show was actually good from the beginning, there would be no franchise fatigue, and it would have succeeded. But anyway, it's different watching it now, because I watch it in retrospect with the knowledge that that's something that in the past, not something that's currently destroying the franchise I love. It's something that's already happened, so I don't need to worry about it anymore. Anyway, enough preamble. Let's finally get into the episodes of Star Trek Enterprise Season 1. So let's start with the first episode, Broken Bow. This episode, again, when I first saw this episode, I hated it. I thought it was the worst piece of shit that ever come along, because I was like, my mouth was hanging open, especially after that theme song came on. Like, you can't you can't comprehend how much of a bad taste that left in my mouth for the entire show, because I did not see that theme song coming. But watching it again now, I still wouldn't say it's a good episode. It's still kind of cheesy, but it's not that bad. It's kind of interesting concept of them going this mission to take this clan to his homeworld to prevent a civil war from happening, like these people from the future are trying to create. Now, they had the Suliban, which I guess they're an okay villain. I don't know, they just seem kind of generic. They didn't seem to do a very good job fleshing them out. Probably better than the Kazon, but not much. I think John Fleck, I think his name is, who plays Silik. He's actually a really good actor, and Silik is an interesting character, so that's probably the highlight of the Suliban. But this episode itself was, I don't know, like, as I said, it was introducing all these boring characters and having the Vulcans acting like total dickheads. And it was kind of interesting seeing them go to the alien world, but then again, you get a lot of what I was talking about, where they're coming off as morons, where even people, scientists and astronauts in modern era would be smarter and have more common sense than these people. So that really interfered with my enjoyment. And plus, again, they were trying too hard to be cool, like Archer said something about knocking you on your ass, and I was just like, shut up, Dad. You don't sound cool. So, yeah, this episode, not very good, but not the worst thing ever. So, get into the next episode, which is Fight or Flight. Now, this is an episode that surprised me, because this is actually a lot better than I remember. Not saying it was very good. It was okay, basically, but I thought it sucked from memory. But I watched it, it's like, hey, this doesn't actually suck, so that's a win. That was okay instead of sucking. So, because it was actually interesting, it was an interesting character exploration, and I stand by that these are flat characters, even Hoshi, but this was an interesting character exploration of Hoshi on how she was like a normal person like me or you, who wasn't trained to be really, I mean, she was kind of trained to be an astronaut, but not really. She just got the basic, you know, throwaway training, and so she was acting more like, what's that huge warp core like is weird to her. It's like, is it going to give me radiation? What's going on? And why are these, do I have to go to an alien spaceship? This is weird. Do I have to put on a spaceship? I'm claustrophobic. You know, I think when I first saw this episode, it really annoyed me, because I was used to the characters who were used to being in space. But once I really get what they're going for with Hoshi, I did think it was kind of an interesting character exploration, and her having, and of course she's saying that she wants to quit because she doesn't think she can hack it out here. Like, that was kind of interesting, but it didn't really go beyond that. And I think the plot of the, you know, the aliens, the generic aliens that come to destroy Enterprise, and they have to communicate with these other aliens to get the other aliens to help them, like, that seemed like a really contrived way to make Hoshi, like, have to save the day. Like, it was dependent on her to translate what these other aliens are saying, otherwise the Enterprise could be destroyed. And that was, like, I think the motions they went to get to that situation seemed a bit contrived, and I didn't quite buy it. So that's why it was kind of like, nah. But not a bad episode. It was actually halfway decent. Anyway, we'll get into the next episode, which is Strange New Worlds, and this episode sucked. This is the kind of Enterprise first season episodes I think of when I think of first season of Enterprise. This episode is silly. It was cliche. So they beam down to the planet, and Tucker's acting like an idiot, and Meriwether's acting like an idiot, and they're like, oh, let's go camping. Like, again, modern day scientists would not act like that. Anyway, and T'Pol, rightfully, like, I empathized with T'Pol in this episode, where she's like, you're being idiots, because that's exactly what I'm thinking. And then they get this psychotropic, you know, disease on this alien planet, which again, it's like, they explain it because there's storms came and the winds blew like the thing that they couldn't scan earlier because it was before the winds came. It really seems to me that they would be able to do a comprehensive scan of the entire region, like the entire continent, from fucking Enterprise, and that they should have detected this shit from space, and that they should have been well aware of the dangers involved. But, you know, whatever. They try to say, oh, this is the first Starfleet ship out there. They're not that equipped. I don't buy that. I think even in modern times you can figure this shit out. But anyway, so, and then you get this cliche storyline of them getting this disease and thinking that T'Pol is the villain. Again, this is playing off their fears of the Vulcans being dickheads, which I'm not a fan of. And Tucker's like acting like a total moron, being like, oh, there's lizard people, the shadow people, the cave people, the blah 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 blah, and and you know, Archer tries to placate him and be like, oh, it's okay because I sent T'Pol to negotiate with the cave people. That's stupid. I'm sorry. I just think that whole thing was dumb. I think this whole episode sucked. So, and this is the kind of thing that I think of when I think of it, season 1 of Enterprise. Anyway, let's move to the next episode, which is Unexpected. And I think I did a full-length review of this episode already. You can check out. I think I liked it a bit better in that review than I did here. Here, I don't think it's very good. I don't think this is a good episode. I think there's some good concepts. Like, I do like the scenes where Tucker is going on board the alien ship, and it seems like what it would be like to go on an alien ship. Like, it's all weird, there's plants growing on the ceiling, and he can't acclimate to it. He's like, whoa, what's going on? Until, like, he has a nap, and then he sort of, and these aliens are totally different. They have, like, this little holodeck version, and they can put their, you know, telepathic powers and stuff like that. But again, it's not really how Star Trek has been established to behave. Why are these aliens so different? And then later they meet the Klingons and some other aliens, and they can go to their ships just fine without having to go through all this shit. So it's just really square peg round hole. But, you know, I still like those scenes. I still thought they were a nice touch. But the whole gimmick of fucking, oh man gets pregnant. And you can tell, like, when the TV Guide article first came out, when the show first came out, they're like, oh, we even have an episode coming out where Tucker gets pregnant. Oh, wacky, eh? And, like, the whole way they were playing Tucker, like, you know, acting like getting high hormones and complaining. First he went to engineering, he was complaining about the handrails and how if you take the elevator up in the engineering that it would take your fingers off if you put your fingers on the handrail. And the guy was like, well, why would you put your hands there? And he was acting like Tucker was an idiot. But actually, Tucker has a really good point. Why the fuck would you have handrails or you could lose your fingers? It seems like they should have a safer system involved. I think Tucker has a point, even though they were treating him, oh, he's just being stupid, but he's being overly, and just the way, like, they had him, like, everyone was teasing him about it, and it seemed very juvenile. Even Dr. Phlox it seemed like he would be a bit more evolved to do it, and so I just think that was a really stupid premise. But what I really hate about this episode is how stupid Archer acts with the Klingons, because he finds they're looking at their trip, gets pregnant, they have to find these aliens to try to get them to, you know, fix it, and they find that the aliens are, like, cloaked or hiding under the wake of a Klingon ship, and so Archer, like an idiot, just barges on, tells the Klingons about it, and of course the Klingons want to kill the aliens, so they have to talk the Klingons out of it, and this whole interaction, the way Archer reacts, would do a better job at communicating with the Klingons. They wouldn't be so stupid to just be like, oh, there's a ship, and knowing how hostile they are, and they almost, like, Archer's idiocy almost got these aliens killed. And the aliens, if I were them, I would be pissed off with Archer. But they didn't seem that pissed off with Archer. They would be like, you moron! You almost got us all killed just because your fucking engineer's pregnant. Jesus Christ, what's the matter with you? And it just really annoys me. Anyway, let's get to the next episode, which is Terra Nova. Another bland, boring, stupid Enterprise episode. God, this is why I hate season 1. Anyway, so, I mean, this episode isn't the worst. It did have some interesting aspects of this, you know, colony, the weird missing colony of humans that they hadn't had in contact. They went out much further than any humans ever gone out before, and they lost contact with them. And Archer goes there to find that a disaster happened there, where they had to be driven underground, and these are, of course, the descendants of the people who were in contact with Earth, because they hadn't been in contact with Earth for 70 years, and these descendants just have vague recollections of humans from Earth being the ones, them having conflicts, so they blame them for what happened to their colony, which is kind of an interesting concept, but the way they played it reminded me a lot of that Voyager episode Friendship 1, which was in season 7, so almost a year or less than a year before this episode came out, so it was really close together. And that episode was not very good. I did not like it because the main bad guy was being very obtuse about, oh, they're coming to kill us, and so it seemed like just a repeat of that, which I found annoying. Although, to be fair, the guy in this episode wasn't being quite as obtuse as the guy in Friendship 1. He was just being a total moron. Here, they, I guess, had more reason to doubt them, but he was still being, like, going out of his way to think Archer was there to kill him when it's fucking obvious he wasn't. It's just so frustrating to watch that. It was like, you're here to kill me. Here, let me help you. Here's some medicine. No, you're here to kill me. It grates on your nerves after a while. So, I don't know. Not a very good episode. Anyway, we'll get to the next episode, which is the Andorian incident, which a lot of people will hold up as one of the best episodes of Enterprise. In fact, at the end of the 4-season run, they did a voting system where people voted for the favorite episodes, and I think this was at number 2. I don't think this is a very good episode. It's definitely not one of the best of the show. I think compared to the crap that they aired so far, it's probably the best. But that's not saying much. It's still... So, one good thing I will say about this is it's introduced Jeffrey Combs as Shran, who is one of the highlights of the entire show. And it's very wise of them to keep bringing him back as a recurring character, because he's a very... Of course, Jeffrey Combs is a great actor, and he does a very interesting character with Shran. But again, this is playing off the Vulcans being dicks, and most of the episode is just, you know, Archer and T'Pol and, you know, whoever else is in their little landing party being tied up and tortured by the Andorians, and like they had that one Andorian asshole like hitting on T'Pol and threatening to rape her or whatever, and that's just it's so cliche. You really do not need that. It's just there to ramp up the tension or whatever. And so most of the episodes like actually cringeworthy to watch. And then the Vulcans, you know, priests or whatever are being dicks and obtuse, and it's just really annoying to watch. But I do like the trans stuff, and I do like the ending where they find out that the Andorians were right after all, that the Vulcans were using this sanctuary as a spy, a listening compound to spy on the Andorians, and basically it's their fault. It's the Vulcans' fault. They'll later, this becomes a recurring theme in this season, which I like. I like that episodes have consequences later on. That's another positive about season 1 of Enterprise, that it has that sense of continuity, that episodes will be referenced and they'll have consequences. And so one of the consequences, the Vulcans will constantly blame Archer and Enterprise for this incident, when really it's their own damn fault for putting a intelligence spy outpost on a sanctuary, on this ancient religious sanctuary. If you don't want the sanctuary desecrated, then don't put a freaking spy outpost there. It's their own fault. So again, that will be examples of the Vulcans being pricks and being arrogant, which I don't like. But, as I said, this episode is okay. So anyway, let's get into the next episode. And speaking of the Vulcans being dicks, let's talk about Breaking the Ice, which, when I did my 5 worst episodes of Enterprise video a few years back, I named this as one of the 5 worst episodes of Enterprise. I don't know if I'll still put it up that high. I think there may be worse episodes than this one, but it's still definitely not a good episode. Again, So Reed and Mayweather go on to explore Comet, and they build a snowman and make a little smiley face. Oh, this is so stupid. That is so dumb. Again, this is their way of, oh, they're trying to make it just like me and you, but they're not just like me and you. They're idiots. And here's the thing. Here's the thing I haven't touched on yet. Is it's not that the characters in the show don't really act like me and you, because they don't act like they're from modern times. They act like they're from the 50s. And this is a running theme that will go throughout the show. It started like the whole thing in the pilot with Archer playing with the showing him as a kid playing with the remote control ship, and the dad's like, "You couldn't do it, son." That felt like it was right out of Leave It to Beaver or something. That felt like, "Oh gee whiz, Dad, my thing's not flying right." And you get the same shit in here where like, "Oh, let's go build a snowman." Like, and then later on they had the whole thing with movie night, and that really annoys the hell out of me, because they actually watch movies from the 40s and 50s. I think one time even went as far as to watch a movie from the 70s. Ooh. Why the fuck are they not watching modern movies? And don't tell me there are no modern movies in the 22nd century, because they're still watching movies. So honestly, there would still be modern movies, and even if they weren't, they would watch something still a little bit more up to date, maybe something from the early 21st century. Why are they watching 1950 movies? It's because these characters behave like they're from the 1950s, and maybe, or at least the 1960s, because that was the age of, astronauts going into space and going to the moon or wherever. So maybe that's what their Bernard Braga is thinking a lot. You have the stereotype all astronauts must be like, oh, the 60s white bread. Oh, gee whiz, Dad, let's build a snowman. And it's annoying. It's uninteresting. It's fucking boring. And this episode is just that. It's fucking boring. And not only that, you got this Vulcan who's like, supervising, sitting over Archer's shoulder, just watching him, and so Archer gets sick of it, invites him on, tries to break the ice, which is again a double meaning for the episode. But then they have the Vulcan go on the ship to have dinner, and he's just a total dick to Archer. He refuses to eat, and then whenever Archer tries to engage him in conversation, he's just like gives one-word answers, just like yes, no. And then finally he's like, when are you going to stop looking over my back? He's like, you humans are so blah, you're so emotional and you suck and blah blah blah. And then at the end of the episode, the big dilemma was Archer had to swallow his pride and ask for help for the Vulcans. So it vindicated the Vulcans that they were such dickheads. But, to be fair, as much as I don't like the portrayal of the Vulcans, they do have a point that the the crew of Enterprise are a bunch of morons. Which it shouldn't be. If this is the humanity's best and brightest, this is what they have to offer, a bunch of morons. Well, it's good to know that there's going to be IQ level drop in 200 years, and people are going to start acting like idiots from the 50s. Anyway, God damn it. God damn this show. Anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is Civilization. Now, this episode surprised the hell out of me, because I was like, oh, I can't wait till we get to this shitty Civilization episode, because I want to trash the fuck out of it. I remember it was sucking. And I watched it, and I was surprised. I was shocked. I was like, wait, this episode's actually pretty good. I think maybe with the first time I saw it, again, this is a syndrome of the fact that I was, wanting a good Star Trek show, a different kind of Star Trek show, something more used to what I got. But this is actually an interesting exploration of them, for humans for the first time going to a pre-warp civilization, and going there under disguise to observe them. And of course, in my memory, I thought that's all it was, that they just went beam down and observed them. But there was actually a plot of these other aliens who were exploiting the pre-warp civilization, and so Archer teams up with the investigator from the planet to stop them. And I actually thought that was done quite well. I thought it was a very interesting plot. I thought the relationship Archer had with the woman, the investigator, was done well, and I thought the other aliens, actually their motivations made sense, that they were creating this, you know, weapon, and they were using this pre-warp civilization planet because it had the right resources. They could go there, reap the resources, and in the process they were harming, you know, spreading a disease to the civilization, but they didn't give a fuck because they're just doing it for money. It was a way for them to make an easy buck, and Archer goes there to stop them. And I think that was actually interesting. To my surprise, this was actually a fairly interesting episode. I did think it was a bit cheesy, though. The romance between Archer and this woman do really always. Of course, we have to have a romance. That's why they made a character female, so she could get it on with Archer. Or basically, like the thing where he kissed her, and because the translator was malfunctioning, and later at the end of the episode, he kissed her again, and it was like, "Oh, is your translator malfunctioning again?" He's like, "I don't understand what you're saying." Like, that's a bit cheesy. But so this is actually a decent episode. Not the best thing ever, but it was actually much better than I remember, so that surprised me. Anyway, let's get to the next episode, which is Fortunate Son. This is another episode that was okay, I guess. I mean, this plays off of the whole... I do like how it explores the aspects of how humans have been in space for a while. The Enterprise isn't the first spaceship, it's just the first Starfleet exploration Warp 5 vessel, that they have a bunch of freighters, and so they have people like Mayweather, who represents the, you know, boomers, I guess they call them, or they baby boomers. They're acting like baby boomers, but anyway... Anyway, like people who were born on spaceships and freighters, and so they have this whole different sort of feel or culture than humans from Earth, and it's about. And I don't mind that they had the Nausicaans as the villains in this episode, because it doesn't. The Nausicaans were shown so little in Star Trek that it doesn't defy canon or any way to have the Nausicaans, because so little is known about them. For all we know, they have been around since the very beginning of humans being in space. And the portrayal as being pirates, of course, is pretty true to the Nausicaans, because for what little we've seen of them, they were pretty antagonistic aliens, but not like a huge threat to the Federation. They were never like a huge threat. They're more of mercenaries or people in the background. So it makes sense that they would just be pirates that humans had to deal with. And it was somewhat interesting, but again, it was kind of boring. And the way that freighter guy, the first officer, took over was being a bit obtuse and not letting Archer help him, and it made Archer his enemy, and who wanted to kidnap the Nausicaan and refused to give him back for no good reason. And yeah, and his whole interactions with Mayweather, who at this point, I'm sorry, is a very flat two-dimensional character, were not very interesting at all. Nice try, but didn't quite work. But not a bad episode. It's fine, I guess. Anyway, let's move on to the next episode, which is Cold Front. So, this is the episode where Enterprise decides to rip off the X-Files. All of a sudden, after not being anything like the X-Files for half a season, they try to do an episode. They do an episode that's just, they want to be X-Files now. I found that very annoying. I remember reading the old critics, was it the Cynics Corner, which I talked about before as a blog that was on when these shows were first airing. And I remember what they said about this episode. They were like, I kept expecting Silic to pull out a cigarette and take a big drag and ask Archer how his mother's doing. Oh, God. But, you know, this is the episode that introduced crewman Daniels, who I think is a very interesting character. And usually when he turns up, it's very interesting. It's a time traveler from the future, from the 29th century, who's like a temporal investigator. And these people were sort of introduced in Voyager, or hinted at, even though it was inconsistent in Voyager, but not getting into that. So it's interesting having this character around. And I thought it was fairly interesting, the concept of him going on the hunt with Silik. And the start of the episode was about like these aliens who were these religious aliens who were studying this anomaly or whatever, and it was a great plume of Agasauria. Like, that was boring, actually. And I didn't mind it that much because it was actually, that's how Silik got on board, and it led to the Suliban storyline. But what bothered me was that later in the episode, when the Silik and the Suliban storyline kicked in, and he was saying, like, Daniel's running around trying to find Silik, and Silik eventually kills him, they intercut these scenes with, like, Phlox, you know, sitting with these boring aliens going, oh, great plume of Agasauria. Like, why are we seeing this? These aliens serve their purpose. Get them. Who cares? Why are we seeing this? It's boring and it's stupid. Why are you wasting time flashing back to this boring, stupid shit when you should be focused more on what's going on with Silik? And then, as I said, like, this episode could have been really good, but they went full X-Files instead. And, you know, you see, earlier in the episodes, you see Silik's talking to Future Guy, which I'll talk about him shortly, when Future Guy is punishing Silik for failing in his mission with, you know, the first episode saying you have to succeed now or you'll be punished, blah, blah, blah. And then in this episode, Silik is acting, again, he's acting very arrogant to Archer, but he's acting, I don't know, you don't really understand, because Silik stops Enterprise from blowing up because that's what he was ordered to do. And then he's, you know, steals this information that Archer tries to steal him, and he kills Daniels, and you don't know why. Why was he ordered to save Enterprise? Why was he ordered to kill Daniels? Why is he trying to steal this? Nothing's answered. It's left all like the X-Files. It's like, it's so much like an episode of the X-Files where a lot of stuff happens, but nothing really happens, if you know what I'm saying. Is that you don't really understand the motivations behind anything, and nothing more on the conspiracy is uncovered. And I find that really frustrating. And this is the episode when you first get T'Pol talk about how the Vulcan Science Directorate has determined that time travel is impossible. And I don't know. I think it's a bit silly, because we know from Star Trek lore that time travel most certainly is possible, so we know that the Science Directorate is wrong, but I guess it's a good character point on the Vulcans and how they're not infallible. And it's actually a character flaw for T'Pol that she keeps going back to this, even when she witnesses time travel and events firsthand that prove time travel is possible. She still stubbornly clings to this almost religiously, and it's not until season 3 where she actually travels herself back to the 21st century that she finally admits that, okay, maybe the science director was wrong. But yeah, it was a somewhat interesting story beat. But anyway, let me get into Future Guy, because this is what really gets me about Future Guy. Actually, no, I'm going to talk about Future Guy a bit later on when I get to Shockwave. So I'll put a pin on this Future Guy. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the next episode, which is Silent Enemy. This is another episode I thought was okay. I thought the main plot about there being aliens who were kind of just fucking with Enterprise, and they were just, because they, I don't know why they wanted to destroy them. I think they were trying to steal their resources or whatever, and they kind of toy with them, like they'll show up and Archer, of course, does this stupid idiotic, hi there, we're trying to meet new people, blah blah blah, I'm an idiot. And the alien, I don't blame the alien for just being like, yeah, let's just go away. And And so, but the alien keeps coming back, and they start attacking Enterprise, and they come on board, and they plant the shit to, like, view them. And I thought the scene where the aliens show up towards the end, and they took the recording of Archer, like, yeah, you know, giving them what for, and they repurpose it to, you know, take words out of it to say, your ship is disabled, surrender or something. And that was very eerie. Like, I like when they do stuff like that. So I think this episode is actually pretty good. But what holds it back a lot is the side plot with Archer trying to figure out what Reed's favorite food is, and then he puts Hoshi on the job, and Hoshi has to try to figure out what his favorite food is. Oh my god, that was so stupid. And at the end, they find it was pineapple. They said they make a cake full of pineapple. They said, "Oh, pineapple! I love pineapple. It's my favorite food." And okay, if you love it so much, why does no one fucking know this? It's just like, who cares? Who cares what his favorite food is? When Hoshi is like, when Archer like ordered her to find this out, and Hoshi's like, "Don't we have more important things to be doing?" I 100% side with her. I think you do have more important things to be doing. And plus, I gotta say, this whole aristocracy of the way how the senior officers get to eat in this, like, cushy, like, captain's quarter, where it's just the captain, the first officer, and T'Pol. And sometimes they have Phlox. In this episode, they had Reed. But usually it's just the three of them. And so they get to be all high up and have all this nice food, and everyone else in the mess all has to eat whatever shit they get, and the captain's all I don't know. I suppose this is mirroring what naval ships, the way they function, but in the way that military, you know, historically has functioned. But this is the future. This is supposed to be Roddenberry's vision of the bright future, at the start of the elevated humanity who is beyond petty shit like this. So kind of annoys me. But anyway, so the next episode is Dear Doctor, and this is a bit of a controversial episode. Yeah, that everyone apparently in recent years I've seen everyone make a big deal out of this episode. Now, I always liked this episode. This is actually one of my favorite episodes of the season. It's one of the few ones I actually think is really good. And it's mainly because of the character story of Dr. Phlox. As I said, Dr. Phlox is my favorite character of the show, and I think this episode does a really great job in delving into his character, and seeing like the crew of the Enterprise through his eyes actually made it that much more interesting. Like, I liked how when they were at the movie night, which again annoys me because why are they watching movies from the 50s and 60s, but he was like, while everyone's watching a movie, he was busy watching everyone else. And I thought that was cool. Really, if you think the movie is that old, it's like centuries old, why would people be crying like they're seeing it for the first time? But anyway, I'm too hung up on that. Yeah, the episode itself was really interesting, and I like the crewman Cutler and his interactions with her. I like how they had this sort of friendship, maybe more-ish. And I like how at one point Phlox, like, right out said, "Look, I'm getting some vibes from you that you're kind of interested in me." And she's like, "Yeah, you're correct. What you're sensing is right. However, I'm not saying that I'm that interested." And he was like, "You understand that Denobuans are totally different than humans, right? Like, I have 3 wives." And she's like, "Well, I'm not saying I want to be wife number 4. I'm just saying I want a friend." And I thought that was a cool relationship. I wish they would have explored it more. I actually wanted to see more of crewman Cutler. I think she appeared in 1 or 2 more episodes after this, but I don't think she appeared after season 1, which I was very disappointed at, and I thought it was a missed opportunity. But I later learned that the actress who played her actually passed away, which is actually quite sad. So I can't blame the show for not bringing her back. There's a tragic occurrence happened that someone would die so young. It is quite tragic. But if she hadn't, I would hope to think that they would have had her on the show more and developed her relationship with Phlox. Not saying they necessarily had to get it on or anything, but it would have been cool to see how their friendship evolved over the years. Now, let me get into the controversy of this episode, which I actually disagree with. You might be familiar, there's a video out there that says, did Captain Archer commit genocide? And I think, it's been a while since I've seen that video, but I believe the conclusion was yes. Which refers specifically to this episode. Because what happens is that the Enterprise comes across this alien race, and they're dying of this, sickness, and it's killing off the race. And they go to the planet and try to help, and they find that there's another species that evolved on the same planet, and they sort of coexist. But the other species is a bit less evolved, and so they're they say they're treated well, but they're pretty much suppressed by the more evolved species. But it's the more evolved species that's dying out, while the younger species is doing well. And so Phlox comes to the conclusion that this is a natural evolution. This is a natural evolution process of survival of the fittest, where the evolution on the planet is weeding out the older species to make room for the newer species to thrive, because it's not quite going to be able to thrive while the other species is still there. And Phlox has moral objections to interfering with this natural evolution process of evolution. And Archer, of course, at first is like, no, well, shut up, Phlox. I'm not going to let these people die, because Phlox, in fact, finds a cure that could cure the species that's dying out, but he recommends that Archer not give it to them. And eventually, even though Archer at first is very resistant, eventually Archer takes Phlox's advice and basically says they're not going to get, so they don't give the cure, and he's like, this is Enterprise bullshit, and Discovery would do this shit too, where they wink too hard. They're like, well, right now there's no rules about interfering with lesser evolved species, but maybe one day we'll have a directive, wink, that actually deals with it. So, Hey, guess what? This is the origins of the Prime Directive. Let's hit you over the head with it. That is basically what that is, which is really annoying. But, and the Prime Directive apparently, and again in recent years, is a highly debated topic. I've seen a lot of arguments, a lot of people fundamentally disagree with the whole purpose and function of the Prime Directive, so it's no surprising that this episode again would strike up the same kind of controversy, because it's dealing with the origin of the Prime Directive. Now, where do I stand on this? Well, as to the question of did Captain Archer commit genocide, I think the answer is undoubtedly, objectively, unquestionably no. I mean, by all definitions of genocide, he did not commit genocide. I think it's personally, and this is just me, I think it's ludicrous, ridiculous, outrageous to suggest that he did. Whether or not you agree or disagree with his decision, I'm not saying you have to. I'm not saying you're ludicrous if you disagree with Archer's decision. Not what I'm saying. I mean, sure, you could disagree with Archer's decision and think that he made the wrong choice and that it was immoral, and I'd love to hear philosophical arguments on that. But objectively, he did not commit genocide, because he, by all definitions, he did not kill anyone. He withheld something. He chose not to interfere, and that's the whole point of the Prime Directive. You choose not to interfere. Choosing not to interfere is different than actually killing people. And Archer even says this, for all he knows, they will go and find the cure. So that's quite an assumption, a leap in logic, because we don't even know these people actually died. You're going to say Captain Archer committed genocide, but what if they didn't even die? What if they actually found the cure and they're all alive? So you're saying Archer committed genocide. Oh, but the people are still alive. No one actually died. So how the fuck is that a genocide? Now, if, hypothetically speaking, if they did reveal somehow that those people did in fact die, it's still not a genocide, because as Archer didn't introduce the disease. He did not cause the disease that would kill them. So, say for example that the Enterprise never encountered these aliens, then whatever would happen without them. So I can't see the logic on how that would be genocide, because Archer actively did not do anything, and so if he was out of the equation, didn't exist, the whole Enterprise didn't exist, then they still would have died. So that's not fucking genocide. I'm sorry. Again, you can agree or disagree with Archer's decision, and I'm kind of on the fence of it myself, but call it genocide is just factually incorrect. I'm sorry, but it is. But anyway, because it's about, and you may say, well, now Mark, you're talking about people being, using inaction. Sometimes people can be harmed by the inactions and others, like this quote, something like the biggest crime is for someone to see something wrong and do nothing, or whatever. But I think to apply that to this situation is being a bit naive, because this is all about, and I actually, to be clear, I'm one of those people who defend the Prime Directive. I'm not 100% on board with it all the time, obviously. Sometimes I do think Picard would take the Prime Directive to a ridiculous extreme, but at the core of the principle, I'm for it, because non-interference. I mean, as I said, there's some examples that the whole entire species is going to die out if you don't act. Then, okay, then you should act. But it's not as clear-cut in this case, because there's another species to be concerned. By saving the dominant species, you could be dooming the other species to a life of servitude, a life of slavery, a life of being mistreated, mishandled. Maybe eventually one day the dominant species will kill off the other species. Or maybe there will be an actual genocide. You don't know. Maybe, maybe not. So by interfering, you're interfering in the natural process, the evolution process of this planet, and that's Phlox's whole point. And I've seen some other videos that say Phlox was flat out evil for suggesting this, and I disagree. I don't think he was flat out evil. Now, whether or not you agree or disagree with Phlox's decision, and I'm still not sure whether personally, I think he does have a point. Whether or not, if I was Archer, if I would act on his point, I'm not actually sure. I might actually tell Phlox to go F himself and give the cure to them anyway. And it is interesting that the episode when Archer does decide to take Phlox's advice and doesn't give the cure, Phlox is like, I'm glad to see that you've evolved, that your humans are actually evolving beyond the puny idiots that you are, and you're becoming smarter and better. And I think that message is a little bit annoying, because that implies that it would have been naive and ridiculous and harmful and immoral to give the cure to them, which I'm also not on board with. I'm not on board with either or. To me, this situation is a lot more gray than simply saying Phlox is evil, or Archer, if Archer didn't listen to Phlox's advice, he'd be a moron. Like, either one, in my opinion, is as stupid as I wouldn't say stupid, but it's I don't know, jumping to conclusions. It's not really a thoughtful way at looking at the situation, because the situation's a fuck ton more complex than to say simply Archer committed genocide. I think that is a very simplistic view, in my opinion. Well, objectively wrong to say he committed genocide. He withheld withholding something is not. And you might bring up the whole like Good Samaritan thing. Well, oh, if you see something bad happening, you're obligated to help. And I think that's a simplistic way to look at this, because these are a totally other species that's visiting a totally different planet that you're totally not from, and by interfering in the process, in the natural evolution process of the planet, they could really fuck things up, and it's not really their place to. The one line in this episode, I think, sums this up great, and I think the people who say Archer's committing genocide for overlooking this line, because I think this line explains everything. It says, Archer said, we are not out here to play God. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about, oh, they're morally obligated to act, but basically that's what you're talking about. Playing God. I get to decide who dies, and I get to decide who lives. These other people should live because I like them, and those other people, they're going to be suppressed and enslaved, but I don't care because I'm God. That's what we're talking about here. And again, that's not to say that the only right decision is to withhold the cure. As I said, I could see good arguments for giving the cure, but it's not as simplistic as to say you must give the cure, otherwise you're committing genocide. Because who is Archer? Who are we? Who is he to play God? I think that was a very good point. Anyway, harped on this enough. So long story short, I don't let the controversy interfere in my enjoyment of the episode. I think it was a good moral commentary, and I see both points of views, and I think that the character story of Phlox is really awesome, so I still do very much like this episode. So let's get to the next episode, which is Sleeping Dogs. This episode was okay, but it was actually rather annoying, because this is another episode where the Klingons are acting very obtuse, and this actually takes it to a really high level where the Klingons were just like, every time Archer tries to help, they're like, fuck you, you're trying to kill us! And I don't know, I don't think the Klingons are ever this freaking moronic. I mean, I know they're antagonistic, but there's a difference between being antagonistic and moronic. And I think in this episode they were more moronic, because it was beyond a shadow of a doubt, beyond obvious that Archer was trying to help the Klingons. And after they saved the ship, Archer saves the entire ship. The entire crew was going to die, and Archer saved them, and they were alive because of him. And so what do the Klingons do? They call up Enterprise and say, prepare to be boarded, we're going to destroy your ship. Come on, guys, that's fucking ridiculous. That's taking it to a new height. I understand misunderstandings. I understand the Klingons are hostile, and I think they would assume other aliens would have hostile intentions. But come the fuck on. They just saved their ship, and their first reaction is like, we're going to blow you up. No, that's just dumb. And I will have to give some credit to Archer. At the very least, like when the Klingons called him after he saved their ship, and someone else said, oh, maybe they're calling to thank us, and Archer was like, I wouldn't count on it. Now you're finally getting it, Archer, because before, like, an unexpected, he's like, oh, Klingons, we're here to help, blah, 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 we're gonna destroy you, and he's finally getting it through his thick head that everything they do to help the Klingons. And, yeah, the name of the episode, Sleeping Dogs, is, the saying, let sleeping dogs lie, which is kind of implying that they should have just let the Klingons left them to die because they're ungrateful shits that just try to kill them and to repay all the help that he's given them. But I don't really think that makes it that much interesting of the story. It's just really frustrating. I did kind of like the aspect of T'Pol, Reed, and Hoshi going on the ship. I love that they mixed it up and wasn't just T'Pol, Archer, and Trip like it always is. And, they're having to deal with the Klingons. But they have this, you have to do that whatever chamber when they get back and have them all in their underwear, and resting and whatever. I mean, not the worst episode ever, but it's kind of, nah. Anyway, Anyway, I'll get to the next episode, which is Shadows of P'Jem, and like, even though I just saw this episode like a couple days ago, I'm already having trouble remembering what happened. Like, every time, like, throughout the years, I look at that episode title and be like, what even happens in this episode? And I just watch it and I still can't really remember. It's that forgettable of an episode. It wasn't like actively horrible. It was just like, as soon as you watch it, it's like a mind eraser. It just erases for your mind because it's so bland and nothing about it is memorable. So what happens in this episode, if I can remember correctly, is that T'Pol gets recalled by Vulcan because they're pissed off at her for the P'Jem, hence the title of the episode. That's the, monastery where the Andorian incident, whatever, it has said the Vulcans are being dicks about the whole thing, not taking responsibility for their own fucking actions like they should, which is, I don't like this portrayal of the Vulcans. So they blame it on T'Pol, so they recall her from Enterprise, and Archer's like, she doesn't give a shit, and Archer's like, why don't you fight this? And she's like, well, whatever. And so her and Archer go on one last hurrah to a planet to visit like some diplomats or something, but they get hijacked by some terrorists and they're held captive. And then Shran shows up and he feels like he owes Archer a favor, so he works with Tucker to try to rescue Archer while the Vulcans show up, and the Vulcans tell Enterprise not to take any action to rescue Archer, that they'll handle it because you're stupid humans, we're awesome Vulcans, and you don't know what you're doing. And then so eventually the Vulcans and the Andorians show up together, both trying to rescue Archer at the same time, and I believe Archer and T'Pol actually managed to rescue themselves, but then the Andorians and the Vulcans show up, and so they start shooting at each other and just making things worse because they're both idiots. And I don't know, something happens where Archer talks sense into them or something. I don't even remember. This episode's so fucking forgettable. Like, the majority, I love Shran, don't get me wrong, but the majority of this episode was just Archer and T'Pol being held captive. It's such a cliche. It's so boring. They do this. They even did this on Enterprise before, and they'll do it many more times, but it's so done so much through Star Trek. Oh, main characters get held hostage by some nameless, faceless, blah, 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 terrorist aliens that we know nothing about, care nothing about. It's just there for them. Oh, it's not character building. It's fucking boring. Anyway, let's get to the next episode, which is Shuttlepod 1. I do think that some people really like this episode. I am not one of them. I do not like this episode. I think this episode is not good. It sucks. I'm trying to avoid using that word, but it does. So, I think probably what frustrates me the most about this episode is when I first saw it, there was like the preview for it, like, got me really excited because it was like, it showed Tucker and Reed going, oh, the Enterprise is destroyed, and the commercial made you think that the Enterprise was actually destroyed, and like, we're stranded and blah blah, we're stuck. And so I thought it was going to be like an alternate reality, like time travel sort of weird thingy, that where like cause and effect, where the Enterprise actually does get destroyed, and they're going to have to deal with, like, I was like all on board for that. I was excited for it. But then when I watched the episode, it's just Tucker and Reed were idiots who just assume Enterprise got destroyed because they saw a bit of debris. That was infinitely less interesting. But beyond that, even beyond that, though, there's not much. I mean, it's so frustrating, too, because in the episode, you know that the Enterprise hasn't been destroyed. They make it clear that they're still around and that Tucker and Reed are just being morons. And the real issue comes up when they're starting to run out of the air, so they think the Enterprise won't get to them before they survive. And the whole thing where Reed keeps recording all these messages to his family, and Tucker's getting frustrated because he won't give up and die. Who cares? And the whole drunk scene, That was stupid. Oh, I think T'Pol has a nice bum. Oh, look at her bum. That's just. Oh, look at the play up the sex appeals, and I already talked about the stupid dream sequences with things with T'Pol was kissing him, and it's god damn it. It just annoys the hell out of me. This episode is bland, boring, cliche, and fucking annoying. I don't like it. Anyway. Let me get to the next episode, which is Fusion. Now, so this is the episode where the weird Vulcans show up. And this was actually an somewhat okay episode from the most part. I like the aspect of them meeting different Vulcans who are not dicks, but they're also like not following the logic. They just interpret the teachings of Serac differently, and I think that's a cool concept, and that makes a lot of sense that there would be fringe groups like this. But I don't know, because they portrayed that one guy whose father is dying has a pretty cool guy, and Trip makes friends with him. Like, I like that aspect of the episode. And the captain himself seemed kind of cool. But then they had that stupid hipstery type creepy guy who was just creeping on T'Pol the whole time. And I was like, and for some reason she was into that, and he was like, oh, let's give you a mind meld, and he does it by force, so it has, implications of sexual assault. But in this episode they make it like mind meld is a sort of a forbidden thing, which I suppose is kind of with canon, because in the original series Spock says Vulcans haven't mind meld for thousands of years or whatever, but they always say bullshit like that in the original series that they can't really keep to. But bottom line is, I didn't really like that storyline with that creeper guy. And, of course the mind meld thing will come up again later. Because, and the scenes in particular where they had the dream sequence where T'Pol is describing her dreams, San Francisco, going to a jazz club, and they're playing the jazz music, and they have the cool cinematography, and they got the jazz music start wailing. And it's like, that's such a cheap ass, obvious attempt to ramp up the sex appeal and seem all risque and sexy or whatever. And it was just, I remember when I was watching it this time, I was just audibly sighing the whole time, going, ugh, it's just so stupid. So that part of the episode I didn't care for. So it was kind of okay, but on the bad side of okay. Anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is Rogue Planet. And this episode is not good. Again, not good at all. It's so boring, cliche. This is another forgettable planet. This is another episode that exemplifies why season 1 of Enterprise sucks. So they go to this rogue planet without a star system, and how it has, it's dark all the time, but how's the heat on the planet? I don't know. Maybe they say it's the inner or whatever. I don't know if this makes geological sense, but who cares? Anyway, they meet these hunter dudes who are like stereotypical asshole hunter guys who are like, oh, hi, and Archer's like, oh, let's go on the hunt, and then they see this like hot chick out in the forest, and it took Archer, I think, to the end of the episode to figure out what was fucking obvious to probably anyone watching this episode, that the things the guys were hunting was the woman he was seeing. And it was just so frustrating and so boring. And then I was sitting by the campfire listening to stupid hunters and Archer being an idiot and being like, oh no, I don't want to do this. And then they finding out that the fucking alien, the hot chick is like, oh, he imagined it from like some story his mother used to tell him or some bullshit like that. And nothing about this episode worked. I'll just put it by that like that. This episode was horrible, horrible, horrible. Anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is Acquisition. Speaking of episodes that are horrible, 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 I never liked this episode, but it wasn't until the time this recent rewatch that I realized how much I actually fucking hate and cannot stand this episode. In fact, this is going to be a very prime contender for one of the worst episodes of the entire show. This, first of all, let's talk about, this is the episode of Ferengi. You know, I like seeing Jeffrey Combs and Nathan Phillips, I think his name is, playing Ferengi. Okay, fine, but what the fuck are the Ferengi doing in Enterprise? Like, when I mentioned the Nausicaans, and I was like, oh, I'm okay with them appearing in Enterprise, that makes sense. So Ferengi, I'm not fucking okay with this, for many reasons. First of all, is in Next Generation Errors, Picard was talking about how they just met the Ferengi. They barely know anything about the Ferengi. And so if you think about that, the area of space explored in the original series, let's say it's like this. And the area explored in space is in the Next Generation is like that. And the Ferengi are on, like, say, the outskirts of that area. And they're just running into them in the 24th century, 2 centuries later. So you're saying that this alien species that they're not going to encounter for another 200 years because they're that fucking far away just so happened to wander and encounter Enterprise. Bull fucking shit to the nth degree. I know why they try to excuse it in this fucking episode by having, they never actually say they're the Ferengi, so the humans never know their names, so they can't say, oh, so when they meet the Ferengi later, they won't know that they actually have been encountered before because they didn't find out what the name of that species was. But bullshit! It doesn't explain what the fuck they're doing that far away from their space. I mean, they didn't say they were on a generational ship. They didn't say they had a Voyager incident where something fling them on the other side of the galaxy. They just so happened to be raiding 200 years travel from their space. No. No! That's bullshit! They should not be encountering a Ferengi. And secondly, why is Enterprise going out of the way to have a fucking Ferengi episode? I mean, the whole concept of Enterprise was so that they wouldn't have recurring aliens like the Ferengi, because they're going back to a time, as I said, centuries before they met the Ferengi. And plus, Ferengi episodes suck! Why are you going to defy canon and defy logic to bring an alien species who typically the episodes they are in are not good? They were by far the worst episodes of Deep Space Nine. Now, this episode in particular was particularly cringeworthy and hard to watch, where like the whole crew is knocked out because these Ferengi are so awesome. God damn it. They're so superior to humans. And they managed to take over the Enterprise, and Archer and T'Pol and Tucker, the only ones awake. How convenient. The 3 main characters who get all the screen time happen to be the ones that are awake. I think they wake up T'Pol. She was asleep at first, because you had to have the Ferengis drooling all over and are talking about how hot she is. Can't have an episode without anyone mentioning how hot T'Pol is. Come on now. And God damn it! I hate this episode. And the whole thing, what happens is Archer and Trip and everyone try to, play mind games with the Ferengis, who are, oh look, they're idiots, they're morons. They had this technology that's like 1 billion times more advanced, they're able to take out the whole ship, yet they're idiots. And they play the same stuff in the stupid fucking cliche storyline they did in that Renaissance Man episode in Voyager, where they had the underling who's underappreciated by the main bad guys. And so he was very naive, so the good guys manipulate him into joining their side and turn against the bad guys because they don't appreciate them. That is a stupid, cartoonish, cliche, idiotic storyline. This whole episode is a giant piece of dog shit. Anyway. Let's get to the next episode, which is Oasis, and I did a full-length review for this episode recently, so I'm not going to get too much into it here. Suffice to say, this is just a ripoff of fucking Shadowplay, a Deep Space Nine episode that did it a billion times better. You know, I actually, since I made that review, I've not on my channel, but I've seen other places on the internet, people who suggest that this is better than Shadowplay. That's like it's suggesting that Atlantic Rim is better than Pacific Rim. If you haven't seen Atlantic Rim, I check out the Mystery Science Theater 3000. Yes, the movie was that bad that Mystery Science Theater 3000 did it, and it was just god-awful. And yes, I'm saying, I am comparing that to this. If you want to say that fucking Oasis is better than Shadowplay, you're saying that fucking Atlantic Rim is better than Pacific Rim. This episode is so much worse than... I think, by default, the fact that Shadowplay came first of all, it shows that they're just ripping off another Star Trek episode because the writers, it has said in my review, the writers were just like, oh, I'm too lazy to come up with an Enterprise episode. Hey, this is Deep Space Nine episode called Shadowplay. Let's just do that. Change names and shit around. We'll even have the actor who plays Odo show up again. We're that lazy. And this is a billion times worse. It's not just the fact that Shadowplay came first, though. Shadowplay actually, I think, is an underrated episode. I watched it recently, and I actually really enjoyed that episode. I think it was a really good interaction between Dax and Odo, and the little girl that Odo meets is really cool. Here, they replace, like, Odo having a friendship with this little girl for Trip drooling over this hot chick, because of course Enterprise, they have to rank up the sex appeal because they have no fucking idea who their target audience is, because the start of the episode is very childish. As I said in my review, it reminded me of Catspaw, the stupid original series episode where they're like supposed to be all scary because it's Halloween, because the whole episode starts out with the merchant guy saying, go to this planet because they're ghosts, woo! So, and they have like Hoshi and Mayweather on the bridge, like teasing each other. Are you scared of the ghost? You're scared of the ghost. And that's very childish, cartoonish, 8-year-old behavior. And then they have to have like Tucker like drooling over the hot chick, which is more for the sex appeal. Who's your fucking target audience? Figure this shit out! Anyway, I don't think I mentioned why this is ripping off Shadowplay, in case you haven't seen my other video on it, is because Shadowplay was an episode that, Odo and Dax investigate this planet, and they find out that the people are missing, and they find out that they're actually all holograms. Here, they investigate this ship, and they find these people, and they want to help them, but they find out that they're all holograms. It's pretty much the exact same fucking plot, and but done worse. Done worse. It's not just a stunned second that they're lazy and ripping it off. They're doing it even worse by having a ghost. Woo! God, this episode sucks. Anyway. This is season 1 of Enterprise for you. Anyway, let's get to a good episode for... Thank God. Let's talk about Detained. Which is actually a decent episode. I don't think this is like a masterpiece or anything. It's not great, but it's okay. You got Al from Quantum Leap showing up. So you got a Quantum Leap reunion between Scott Bakula and... God, why is that guy's name escaping me? I don't know. I'll think of it later. But the dude who play Al. Anyway, they... Dean Stockwell. That's it. Haha, I thought of it. Dean Stockwell. Anyway, this was a very obvious sort of metaphor, because this episode, I think, aired shortly after 9/11, so it was about like the backlash against the Muslim community, how people were stereotyping and being prejudiced and racist towards all Middle Easterners, really, not just Muslims. And so this is making commentary on that, and how they could, how it's not really a good thing to lump people together. And I think I like the nuance here, that they make a point to say that the Suliban themselves are not an evil species. It's just this one group called the Cabal, which basically is like a terrorist, so they're obviously making comparisons to like Al-Qaeda, that this is just one terrorist group, and the majority of Sulibans have nothing to do with it, and they're just trying to live their lives, and they're just trying to raise their families, and they're being imprisoned just because of their race. And of course, Archer in the episode brings up the Japanese American internment camps during World War II, which is definitely another good example. But you know, really, that when they made this episode, that they were thinking of something a bit more modern. But they can't say that they can't be on the nose like that. And that's a good thing about science fiction. I like, because if you do be on the nose and people were like, yeah, it's ridiculous, but by actually showing it through allegory, I think is actually a bit more powerful. So I did really enjoy that episode, but some of the actual events watching it are kind of dull. But I still think it's a good episode, because I do really like the message. It is kind of boring seeing Archer and Maeve where they're just in the prison again. They're always in prison or captured or something. But I did enjoy some of the interactions with them and the other Suliban, and seeing Archer be like, fuck it, we're gonna free them all because this is wrong. See, this is being an example of Archer defying the directive that doesn't exist yet, which I totally agree with, and I think he totally should have. So anyway, so it's a good episode. Not fantastic, but it's good. Anyway, let's get to the next episode, which is Voxula. Voxula, which I didn't think this was the worst episode ever. I remember this episode being really bad, and I watched it. I was like, it's not that bad, but it's not that good either. It's still a bad episode. Is where they had this white thingy alien creature like kidnaps people, and boy, that CGI does not age well. Let me tell you, it looks so like cheesy computer generated tentacles reaching out, and so they're all, Archer and Tucker and a few others are trapped in this white, this monster that's holding them all, and it's integrating them all into itself. So it's basically killing them, and they're all going to become one creature. So there's a time crunch, which I did find somewhat suspenseful, and I did Reed and T'Pol trying to come up with plans to break them free, but then until they realized that they actually need to work with the creature, and it's all down to Hoshi figuring out how to talk to it. So that was interesting, but most of the episode was actually kind of boring, because it was about them being just sitting there and this white monster thing being trapped, going, oh, I'm trapped. This seems to be a common theme with Enterprises, even if it had an interesting premise, but it doesn't do much with it. It just has them sitting in the room going, oh, this sucks. Anyway, let's get to the next episode, which is Fallen Hero. Now, this episode is good. I remember liking this episode, this being one of my favorites of season 1. And I watched it again, and it's even better than what I remember. So this is the episode where they go to pick up this Vulcan from a planet who is T'Pol's childhood hero. She met her once, and it inspired her to join the Vulcan science thingy, and she's apparently been disgraced. She's accused of a crime or something, and she doesn't deny it. So Archer and T'Pol just assume that she's guilty of this crime, and they're gonna take her back to meet the Vulcan ship. But then these other aliens come up and they're like, "Hey, we've been sent to bring her back to the planet." And he was like, "Wait, but they were all in a hurry for her to leave. Why are you gonna take her back?" He's like, "It's all good. Don't worry about it." And then Archer figures out that they are fucking liars, that they're lying, so he plans to ignore them, and of course they know that he knows they're lying, so they just start fucking attacking the ship, and then it leads to this like epic chase. Now I think this is a really the reason why I like this episode so much is because it was really suspenseful. First of all, like having this high speed, like the way they actually did this like submarine type chase, like a high speed starship chase sequence, is probably one of the Star Trek rarely does it this well, that is this suspenseful, and it works this well, and the stakes are actually really high. I absolutely love at one point how they're like, because they're called a Warp 5 ship, but so they have to take it all the way up to Warp 5, but they can't maintain it, but the other ships are like, had the same sort of capabilities, but they managed to keep up with them, and like both their engines are about to explode on them. That was super fucking intense. But what I like even more about it is that they the character stories here, and how this this Vulcan ambassador is different than most asshole Vulcans. She's actually wants to get to know humans. She tries to, like T'Pol's assume, oh, we gotta remove all this stuff, and oh, she can't stand the smell or whatever, and she's like, she's fine, she wants to interact with humans, she wants to get to know them better. But this is the one episode I think that takes the aspect of the Vulcans being dickheads and uses it correctly. It makes it interesting because it's about because she's not really being a dickhead, as I said, because she's actually cool with humans, but she still doesn't quite trust them, and she withholds knowledge. And that's what pisses Archer off, to the point where at one point he just turns around and goes back to the planet. It's like, fine, you won't tell me what's really going on, then I'm not going to fucking take you to the Vulcans. Which I absolutely loved. And eventually she had to T'Pol talk her into trusting Archer, so she told Archer what was really going on, that actually there were some criminals who were crime lords who were trying to overthrow the government, and she had incriminating evidence against them, and they were trying to kill her to prevent her from testifying against them, which was awesome. And I really like the actor who played this alien bad guy. He did such a great job. And of course, like, Archer finds, at the end, Archer realizes that he's trying to make it back to the Vulcan ship, and he won't get there in time. They'll be only 6 minutes shy. So they come up with a ruse instead to have the aliens come on board and say, oh, the ambassador's in there and that medical thing, and of course they shoot it up and kill her, and he acts like she's dead, and that just gives the Vulcans time to show up, and once the Vulcans show up, they reveal, we fooled you, she's still alive. And I love that. I love everything about this episode. I'm actually surprised how much I like this episode. I think it's a strong character story. It's very extremely suspenseful, very intelligent, very atypical of a season 1 Enterprise episode. Anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is Desert Crossing. Fallen Hero, by the way, was the first episode where they mentioned Risa, where T'Pol's like, oh, you should go to this planet and release sexual tension, and it becomes a gag, because in the next episode they're like, oh, we're going to Risa, but instead they, meet this alien who rescues the ship, and he's like, oh, I demand, played by Clancy Brown, anyway, amazing actor, who I think is wasted in this shit episode, but they demand that they go, and so they go to the desert, and they, play this weird sport, but then they realize that the guy has an ulterior motive, that he's, really a terrorist, and he wants Archer and the others to, help them fight the oppressors, because they heard about what Archer did with the Suliban. Now, I do like how, as I said, how actions in the show, or episodes, events that occur in the show, have consequences further down the line. That's something a lot of other Star Trek shows don't do, that annoys me. And that is the one positive aspect of Enterprise, is that they do often reference events from earlier, and that Archer, and it makes sense that by Archer doing things, the breaking the directive that even though I agree with it, that's going to have consequences. And I love that the consequences that he has this false reputation of being this warrior savior type. Really, he's just an explorer, and it's hard for him to try to break it to this guy. And so he's in this situation where he thinks his life is in danger because the freaking government's attacking, and the guy doesn't really care. But he eventually, like T'Pol, talks him into helping him find Archer. Now, the reason why this episode sucks is because the majority of it, again, this is the thing with Enterprise, again, the majority of the episode is just Tucker and Archer wandering through the desert being like, oh, this sucks, we're in the desert, we're gonna die, this sucks. And that's fucking boring. And the other stuff with the other guy, you know, who thinks he's a terrorist, and at the end Archer is like, oh, I actually think that their cause was worthy. Well, how do you fucking know that? You don't even know anything about them because they didn't even like explore anything. They're just like faceless, nameless, stereotype aliens. Of course they have to be in the desert and speak with, even though they got mostly white actors to play them, they had to speak with kind of an Arabic accent, and I was just like, yeah, you're stereotyping there a little bit. Anyway, because it's about terrorists, get it? So this episode sucked. Anyway, let's get into the next episode where they actually do get the Risa 2 days and 2 nights, and this episode's actually fine. I actually talked about this at length, and I did a full-length video on this episode already. I talked about this episode a lot on my channel because this is one of the lowest rated episodes of Enterprise, and people generally say this is one of the worst episodes of Enterprise, but I think that's a bit ironic because I actually think it's one of the better episodes of Season 1. I think take your pick. There's like a buttload of episodes that are worse than this one. Not saying this episode's great. It's okay at best. It's average at best. But there are much worse episodes in Season 1 than this one. So when I did a series of episodes that I like that everyone hates, I did this episode for Enterprise. I think to say that I like this episode might be a bit too strong. I just don't hate it. I think there are more episodes worthy of hate than this one. Now, to be clear, there's like 5 different storylines. The storyline with Reed and Tucker trying to, you know, get lucky, trying to hook up with some hot chicks. That storyline sucked. I do hate that storyline because it plays, and because the whole thing was T'Pol's like, you need to go to the planet to release sexual tension, but it actually plays Tucker and Reed has like assholes or idiots or smug for wanting to get laid, where Hoshi goes and she gets laid when she doesn't even try. And I suppose that's supposed to be the irony. But then, like, when they get robbed, like, they get violated, they get taken advantage of by these aliens who pretend to be hot chicks, and they shapeshift and they rob them, they leave them tied up, and they're like, it's a traumatizing experience for anyone. Like, if anyone's ever been robbed like that and tied up, like, that's a traumatizing experience. And they play it for laughs. They play it for jokes. They play it like, oh, that's what those idiots get for trying to get laid, which I don't get the fucking logic behind that. And plus, the way they were behaving, like, all goofy, oh, you're hot, it's just, But, you know, you might be like, Mark, you're contradicting yourself. I thought you said this wasn't a bad episode. Well, it's not, because that was just one storyline. The other storylines I actually think are a bit better. Like the one with Hoshi, you know, meeting that guy and speaking the language, that's actually kind of interesting. It brings up her, delves into her characters. Kind of, as I said, it shows like a true like sort of romance and how she relates to this other alien because they can speak all these different languages. I thought that was developed really nicely. The stuff with Archer meeting this chick who. That storyline started out good, but then they tried to get it. That storyline too got a bit too X-Files towards the end because they didn't really explain what was going on. They said that she was the same species as Al Dean Stockwell from Quantum Leap from the episode Detained, that those aliens that were hated the Suliban or whatever, and so she kept drilling him for more information about the Suliban. But when Archer found out who she really was, she just knocked him out and said, "I'm sorry, I can't let you interfere." It does seem like they were setting up for the storyline to go somewhere, but they never followed up on it. So watching it in retrospect, it seems kind of just a waste and not there. But why I really say that this episode's not that bad, and there's much worse episodes, is the Dr. Phlox storyline, because I loved the Dr. Phlox storyline. The storyline alone, I think, is one of the funniest scenes. I couldn't say that whole episode is one of the funniest episodes of Star Trek, because the other storylines weren't funny, especially the Tucker and Reed one. But the Phlox one had me in stitches, had me laughing my ass off. I thought, I want to watch these scenes again. John, what's his name who plays Phlox? John Billingsley or something. His comedic timing was perfect. It was beautiful in this episode. So what happens is that Mayweather goes his rock climbing in the rock face that changes, and he falls and he injures himself, so he goes to a Rising hospital. But they never treated humans before, so I'm not sure what to give him. So they give him something, he has an allergic reaction to it, and so he goes back to the Enterprise, and he's having Purple's breathing, and the reaction is getting really bad, and Cutler doesn't really know what to do because it's not her field. She's not as smart as Phlox, so they have to get Phlox, but Phlox is hibernating. And it's funny because before Phlox said, "Only wake me if it's a medical emergency." So they wake him, but he's acting drugged, basically. He's acting really drugged and drunk because he's half asleep, and they woke him up too early. And just his comedic timing, the way he acts, I can't even attempt to repeat some of the jokes he says. It's just so perfect. You have to watch the scenes itself. He's "We need to treat him with regular bloodworms. Oh, but we need fresh ones." He calls the bridge. He's "Bridge, full warp to regular." And DePaul's "Phlox, maybe you should return to your quarters." It's "I appreciate the offer, to Paul, but I think we should keep our relationship strictly professional." Oh my god, those scenes were fucking hilarious. They were awesome. So overall, I would say this episode is okay. Because even though it had aspects of it sucks, aspects that were okay, aspects that kind of worked, kind of didn't, but also had this aspect that was fucking awesome. So ultimately, it's a middling episode. Anyway, let's get into the big finale, Shockwave Part 1. Now, again, I actually really liked this episode. I thought this was one of the better cliffhangers of all Star Trek. I thought so. This was a very compelling episode. So it starts, although at the beginning when they're talking about a matriarchal society, like a society dominated by women, but men had made strides to have equal rights, and Tucker seems aroused by this. He's "Oh, well, maybe, even though maybe it's not a good idea not to get too flirtatious." And Archer's "Yeah, maybe not." Why is he getting aroused? Why does he want to flirt with them just because they oppress the men? I don't get why that would make them attractive. I guess because, strong women are attractive, but there's strong human women are strong as well. Just just because they're oppressing the other sex with gender inequality doesn't make them. How does that make? I don't know. But that's not what the episode is about. The episode's about they accidentally destroy this colony, and they swear up and down that they followed the protocols, that they didn't do anything to destroy them, but this gives the Vulcans all the excuse they need to cancel Enterprise missions, and this is where Ackerman Daniels shows up again, and he tells them that actually, no, you weren't the cause of it. And I love, most of the episode, Archer is feeling sorry for himself, and gone to this really dark place, and T'Pol tries to bring him out of it, and look, blah blah. But he, think that he killed thousands of people and caused the cancellation of the humans' exploration of space. Like, that is quite devastating. But then Daniel shows up and takes him back in time and talks to him and is like, look, you didn't cause this. This is Suliban. They had orders from the future to interfere with their mission, and they're the ones who did it. And this is what I love, because up to this point, the Sulibans constantly always got the better of Enterprise and always kicked their ass and always was like mysterious and X-Files or whatever. But in this episode, Daniels gave them like the cloaking frequency, told them exactly where to find the information they needed to prove their innocence, and they raided the Suliban ship and they kicked ass, and those scenes are so satisfying. They were so awesome to see, the Enterprise crew just show up, rock up on the Suliban, fuck shit up, go over, take what they want, and leave and kick their ass. That was so gratifying. But they had to have the Suliban get the better of them at the end, which was actually super tense, which I actually think was really suspenseful. How Silik was like, oh, you might want to, uncloak and you'll see what I'm talking about. And there was like completely surrounded the ship by Enterprise, by all the Suliban ships. And they're like, you have to send us Archer or we'll destroy the ship. Now, let me get into Future Guy. I said I'd talk about Future Guy. It's probably more relevant to talk about him in part 2, because I'll talk about part 2 when I do my season 2 review, though. But so let me talk about him now, because Future Guy has the show is, he's kind of dumb because they never reveal who he is. Like, it's obvious from the beginning, like, there's this shadowy figure, you don't know who he is, and he's sending orders, and they never give you the answer of why he's sending the Suliban orders. It just eventually becomes irrelevant because they kind of just forget about the storyline. And I really strongly believe, and as I said, I'll get to this more when I cover season 2, that they should have revealed who Future Guy was in Shockwave Part 2. That is one of the reasons why that episode kind of sucked, and what ruined the second part is because in this episode they were setting it up like he goes to Silik and is like, bring me Archer. So you want to know, why does he want to see Archer? We never find this out, which pisses me off. And so it seems like it would have to do with his identity. Maybe they would reveal who he really is and what's going on, but it's never revealed, and this would have been the perfect time to do so. Now, the other thing is that I've heard rumors, or maybe someone said, like in an interview with Brendan Braga, he said that the Future Guy was supposed to be a future version of Jonathan Archer. Oh my god, that sounds so dumb. That sounds so dumb. I guess if that's the case, maybe I should count my lucky stars, count my blessings that they actually didn't reveal that it was Future Archer, because that would be fucking stupid. It's like the whole Red Angel thing from Discovery, how that it was future Michael Burnham. Like, that was dumb, dude. You don't have... And this would make no sense. Why is he trying to cancel Enterprise's mission if he's future Jonathan Archer? Wouldn't that erase his past? Or maybe that's what he wants. I don't know. And why is they purposely became the antagonist? Why would the main antagonist be a future version? I don't know. It's just stupid. But I don't know if that's the case, because during the commentary for the pilot episode, the Brendan Braga and Rick Berman, they specifically say in that commentary that they actually don't know who Future Guy is. They never figured it out. And to me, that actually sounds more like them. Maybe one of the ideas they had floating around their heads that it might be future Jonathan Archer, but I think for the most part, they didn't know who Future Guy was. They just did it because it looked cool. And that is totally in keeping and in the spirit with Season 1 of Enterprise. Let's just do random bullshit because it looks cool. Anyway, I still like Shockwave. I still, even though the second part was a disappointment, which I'll get to next season, I still think this was, in itself as an episode, was really, really suspenseful and really good. So, that is it. That is all the episodes of Star Trek Enterprise Season 1. I made it. Now I have to do Season 2. But anyway, let me name the best and the worst episodes of Season 1 of Enterprise. So, oh my god. Worst episode. So many contenders for worst episode. It's just ridiculous. I had to even narrow it down. So you got Unexpected, you got Terra Nova, you got Shadows of P'Jem, you got Strange New Worlds, Breaking the Ice, Shuttlepod 1, Desert Crossing, Rogue Planet, and Oasis. But the winner of this entire shit show of this shitty ass season is Acquisition. This episode was just, it was painful to watch. It was like torture watching this episode. I never want to watch this stupid fucking episode again. It's bringing the Ferengi, even though it makes no sense, and they do a stupid, one of the worst Ferengi episodes ever, and it just had all the stupid cliche of, oh, the Ferengis are stupid, let's play tricks with them, oh, this is my wife, oh, blah, 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 and they just have the fucking Jeffrey Combs be the naive henchman that they corrupt and get him to turn against his other henchmen. I was like, ugh. Pure shit. Pure shit. Anyway, let's talk about the best episode of Season 1, and there were considerably less contenders for this category. Only 3 contenders. There was Dear Doctor, which I enjoyed, but the next 2 episodes were really close. They were neck and neck. It was actually hard for me to decide which one I liked better than the other, but in the end, I'm going to have to say that Shockwave is the runner-up, and that my best, most favorite episode of Season 1 is Fallen Hero. I think Fallen Hero slightly edges out Shockwave, even though they were both intense, they were both suspenseful, and they were both structured very well. I think Fallen Hero slightly wins over it for me because of the character story. Because I think the character stories really shine through with T'Pol having her hero thinking that she's this criminal, but finding out that she's actually not, but trying to convince her to trust Archer, and Archer trying to building this rapport with her, which is the backdrop of this like super intense spaceship chase, which is done extremely well. So I do have to say, this is, even in a pile of shit, you can have a rare gem. Anyway, my rating for Star Trek Enterprise Season 1 as a whole out of 10 is a 3. Very poor. Now, I recently just did a video where I ranked all the seasons of Star Trek, and I said that I gave this season a 2. So I do have to admit that watching it again, I realized it's not quite as bad as I remember, so I am upping it to a 3, but a 3 is still a very bad score, just to be clear. It's just not as bad as a 2. Because you have Fallen Hero and Shockwave, which were so great, and what was the other one? Oh, Dear Doctor, which is also very good, and then you also have Civilization being a lot better than I remember, and a few decent episodes like Cold Front, Silent Enemy, and whatnot. But too much crap, too much boring, bland, throwaway nonsense. Like, this is, I stand by, this is one of the worst seasons of the Star Trek franchise, because it was too much throwaway, bland nonsense. And, as I said earlier, that when I average out all the episode ratings, it comes to a 4.75. You might be like, well, then why are you giving it a 3, Mark? That's a bit unfair. That's lower than the 4. Because there's things that episode ratings don't take into account, because it's not all about how good each episode is, it's how the season works as a whole. And how it works as a whole is that the characters are incompetent morons when they shouldn't be, and it tries too hard to be sexy, and it has the fucking theme song, which is a huge strike against it. So all of that just really downgrades and degrades the quality of the season overall. But as I said, some positive aspects to it. I do have to admit it wasn't as painful watching this season as I thought it would be. So that is it for my review of Star Trek Enterprise Season 1. I shall return in a month to review Season 2. Oh boy, cannot wait for that. I am very much convinced Season 2 is going to be much worse than Season 1, but we'll see. So be sure to check that out. Also check out my channel as I do many more Star Trek videos. I also do other videos and other shows like The Expanse, Lost, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.